If I told you the loudest, most annoying neighbor on the block once burned down my beloved corn barn, without realizing I secretly held more power than the entire homeowners association combined, would you believe me? Probably not. But buckle up, because this story isn't just about a barn, and it's not just about corn. It's about arrogance, hidden authority, and how one fiery act of pettiness backfired spectacularly. Picture this. After years of hearing arguments, banging gavels, and weighing the fates of people in a federal courtroom, all I wanted when I came home was peace. The kind of peace where crickets sing at dusk, the breeze smells faintly sweet, and the loudest drama is deciding which row of corn you're going to water first. That's why I'd chosen this neighborhood. It was safe, quiet, and just far enough away from the city that you could see stars at night. My house wasn't flashy. My lawn wasn't manicured like the cover of a magazine, but it felt like home. More importantly, tucked at the edge of my lot stood the pride of my property, my corn barn. Now, some people get excited about classic cars, others about fishing boats. For me, it was heirloom corn. Rainbow-colored cobs stacked neatly inside a rustic wooden barn I had designed myself. This wasn't just a storage shed. It was my sanctuary. The barn was big enough to hold my tools, catalogs of seeds, and rows of earth-stained gloves. When you stepped inside on a sunny day, thin beams of light sneaked through the cracks, settling like spotlights on stacked bushels of corn. The air smelled of dry husks, soil, and nostalgia, because this barn was really about memory. See, my grandparents were farmers. They'd taught me that corn wasn't just food. It was history, culture, even art. Every striped cob or deep purple kernel told a story that connected me back to them. Working in that barn, I heard echoes of their voices reminding me to be patient, to tend carefully, to respect the crops. After long days in court, balancing the weight of other people's fates on my shoulders, slipping into that quiet barn was therapy. Most neighbors actually enjoyed it. A couple of kids would wander over on weekend afternoons, wide-eyed when they saw the dazzling colors of the ears. Reds, blues, yellows streaked like paint against the sky. I'd hand them a cob and watch their faces light up, like discovering candy nature had hidden in plain sight. But while most people found it charming, not everyone felt that way. There was one person, one thorn in this otherwise peaceful garden, who saw my beautiful corn barn not as a symbol of history or hobby, but as a target, a rule breaker, a neighborhood nuisance. That person was Karen. And if there's one thing you should know about her, it's this: peace doesn't survive long when she's around. At first, Karen's attacks came in whispers and petty jabs, the kind that barely feel like an inconvenience but gradually chip away at your peace of mind. It began with notes, folded pieces of paper in my mailbox written in that passive-aggressive tone only Karen could master. Perhaps you're unaware, one note began, that your barn violates the neighborhood's carefully curated aesthetic. Another simply said, structures like yours can lead to wild animal infestations. Do better. Signed, of course, with a dramatic flourish, HOA Compliance Committee. Then came the suspicious, anonymous complaints. One week, I was told my barn was too tall. The next, it was too rustic. When those didn't stick, she claimed the faint earthy scent of drying husks reeked like a farming operation. You heard that right. My corn barn was apparently one step away from a pigsty in Karen's imagination. Karen wasn't just picky. She had a talent for making everything sound like the end of civilization. Once, she even marched across the street during one of my watering sessions, clipboard in hand, shouting, "Do you realize how this eyesore affects property values?" As if my corn was single-handedly responsible for causing a real estate market crash. The real battle line was drawn at an HOA meeting. Now, HOA meetings are usually tedious affairs where the biggest issue is whose recycling bin wasn't rolled in quickly enough. But this one, it became the stage for Karen's war declaration. She stood up, cleared her throat dramatically, and launched into what I can only describe as a filibuster against corn. She claimed the barn frightened children, that raccoons were probably nesting in it. And this one is a favorite, that the corn attracts coyotes. The room went silent, half the neighbors suppressing laughter, the other half rolling their eyes so hard you could hear it. I sat there calmly, arms folded, letting her rant. Because here's the detail Karen never knew. I wasn't just some corn-loving hobbyist. In the courtroom, I was a feared federal judge who'd stared down hardened criminals and icy-veined attorneys. Do you think Karen's performance rattled me? Not a chance. I let her dig her own hole. What I didn't know then was that Karen wasn't just a complainer. She wasn't going to stop at angry notes or public shaming or exaggerated accusations. No, the seeds of obsession had been planted. And when Karen sets her sights on enforcing standards, she goes further than anyone dares to imagine. It happened on a night that seemed like any other. The neighborhood was quiet, porch lights glowed faintly down the street, and the air was heavy with late summer stillness. Around 2 a.m., I was jolted awake by a strange crackling sound, followed by the sharp sting of smoke drifting through my open window. At first, I thought perhaps someone's grill had tipped over or maybe a small brush fire. But when I flung open the door, my heart stopped. My barn, the place I poured years of care, memories, and effort into, was nothing but a roaring inferno. Flames licked high into the night sky, embers floating upward like fireflies from hell. The wooden beams that had once sheltered rows of colorful corn snapped and collapsed, showering sparks like grotesque fireworks. The sound was deafening. Wood popping, glass shattering, the faint whistle of the wind feeding oxygen into the blaze. My sanctuary was being reduced to ashes in front of my eyes. And the smell, the acrid bite of burning wood and husks, seared into my senses, turning my stomach. I called 911 with shaking hands. Sirens wailed in the distance within minutes, but by then it was clear. This wasn't an accident. Something gnawed at me even in my shock. Barns don't just spontaneously combust at 2 a.m. There were no storms, no faulty wiring, no candles left burning. As the firefighters fought the blaze, sprays of water hissing against the flames, a neighbor jogged over looking uneasy. He muttered something that twisted an ache in my chest into sharp anger. His security camera had caught a figure creeping across my yard before the fire erupted. A figure carrying what looked suspiciously like a gas can. It didn't take long for the footage to surface. And there she was, Karen. The same Karen who had raged at HOA meetings, who had hissed about property values, who had shoved complaint letters into my mailbox. On video, plain as day, sneaking around like a villain in a bad movie. I watched the footage once, twice, 3 times. Astonished not just at her audacity, but her carelessness. She'd burned down my barn, my history, my peace. And in doing so, she had unleashed something far bigger than flames. This wasn't just neighborhood pettiness anymore. This was arson. And arson has consequences, especially when the victim isn't just a hobbyist, but a federal judge. The morning of Karen's arraignment felt surreal. The barn, or what was left of it, still smoldered in my mind every time I closed my eyes. Blackened beams, charred husks, a memory turned into rubble. But I wasn't the only one carrying something heavy that day. Karen strutted into the courthouse like it was just another HOA meeting. Same stiff shoulders, same clipped pace, same superiority painted across her face. In her mind, she'd probably rehearsed excuses. It was an accident. Or, the footage is grainy. You can't prove it was me. Maybe she thought that if she turned the right shade of victimized indignant, she'd worm her way out. After all, in the neighborhood, she'd always managed to boss and bluff her way past everyone. What she didn't know made the entire moment delicious for me. The judge presiding over her case was me. I'll never forget the sound in the courtroom when the bailiff announced, "All rise for Judge." There was a collective shuffle of feet, and then stillness. Karen stood there frozen, jaw slack, eyes darting up at the bench where I stepped through in full robes. For one golden moment, the woman who had terrorized an entire neighborhood with her nitpicking and bullying had nothing. No words, no power, no clipboard to hide behind. Now, of course, professional ethics are no joke. I couldn't actually sit in judgment of a case where I was the victim. Immediately, I stated on the record that I would be recusing myself and transferring the matter to a different courtroom. That's protocol. That's fairness. But here's the thing. The optics were already undeniable. For the rest of the community, for the officers and attorneys, even for the bailiffs who'd had their fill of cases like hers, everyone saw what had happened in that instant. Karen, the self-proclaimed guardian of HOA rules, had picked a fight with the wrong person. Word spread like wildfire. Neighbors whispered in grocery store aisles, gossiped at mailboxes, and shook their heads in disbelief. "Did you hear?" they'd say. Karen set fire to a federal judge's barn. If she had once been feared, now she was infamous. Her empire of petty rules collapsed in a single day. And from the look on her pale, wide-eyed face in that courtroom, she realized she hadn't just crossed a line. She'd walked headfirst into her own ruin. Once the gavel came down in Karen's official trial, the reality of her crimes could no longer be hidden behind HOA jargon or smug smiles. The charges were clear: arson, property damage, reckless endangerment. She wasn't battling unfair lawn ordinances anymore. She was facing the cold weight of criminal law. And unlike myself, the law has no patience for Karen-style dramatics. The sentence? Community service, probation, and full restitution for damages. She'd pay back every penny, not just for the barn, but for the sentimental value she could never replace. And even though prison time was on the table, the judge assigned her work that, in my opinion, suited her perfectly: months of roadside cleanup where instead of lecturing neighbors about neighborhood standards, she was the one sweating under a neon vest, picking up fast food wrappers and soggy soda cans. Poetic little twist of fate. As for the HOA, embarrassed by the scandal and desperate to save face, they stripped Karen of any and all authority. No more meetings where she could grandstand. No more clipboards brandished like weapons. For years, she'd thrived on controlling others, but now she couldn't even control the length of her own leash. It was the kind of downfall you don't just witness, you savor. Meanwhile, my story didn't end with the ashes of a barn. Thanks to insurance and restitution funds, I rebuilt from the ground up. The new barn stood taller, stronger, reinforced with steel beams and flame-retardant panels. Neighbors stopped by to admire it, not out of obligation, but out of genuine support. They wanted to see something beautiful rise from the ashes of someone else's bitterness. Each fall since, I've turned the barn into a gathering spot. We roast corn under string lights. Neighbors laugh where once they whispered, and kids run around with sticky fingers from buttered kernels. It became more than just my sanctuary. It became a symbol that one person's cruelty can spark a community's strength. And Karen? Let's just say she doesn't attend. Rumor has it, she avoids the street entirely. Maybe she's embarrassed. Maybe she's still fuming. Maybe she's realized that when you pick a fight with corn, you might just get burned. And that's the wild tale of how an HOA Karen learned the hard way you don't mess with the wrong barn. If you enjoyed this story of justice, suspense, and just a little bit of sweet corn karma, hit that like button, smash the subscribe, and click the bell so you never miss the next twist-filled tale. Stay tuned because sometimes reality writes the best dramas.